first church and school secretary, but Pastor Becker was so used to always doing all his own work that I really didn't do hardly anything at all for him. Mostly I did the school, work for the school. So Richard Rolfe was here when I came on, and Pastor Becker retired that year, so then I worked for Pastor Loesch. Pastor Loesch came because Richard Rolfe was just always used to me doing mostly school because Pastor Becker did everything himself. So then there was a little bit of a tug of war and I hated the bulletin and the trumpet because it was the old cranked mimeograph and the stencils. I remember one Sunday I was ready to put the stencil on, and I looked and I had "The choir will sin" in the early service. And I thought, I can't do that. So I squeezed this little G in, but everybody knew that I had done that. And then one Sunday, this one woman gave a poinsettia every year for her dead parents, and I don't know how I happened to do it, but I resurrected the dead people and killed off the lady that was giving the poinsettia, which brought me one of the relatives early on Monday morning who was not happy about that. But eventually, we got better equipment. Our folding machine was the pits usually. And I can remember one time the printer wasn't working, and so they sent me actually over to the business center in Quincy to run off the bulletin and the trumpet over there, which was a problem because people kept coming up and asking me to wait on them, and I had to keep explaining that I didn't really work there. When I started, the job of the church secretary was a little bit different. I had to come over and put the hymns on the board. I had to do the outside signboard, which could be bad in the wintertime. And of course, then there were the communion cards and the pencils. And then there was this big, thick book over there that we registered everybody, confirmants, weddings, babies, and what have you. And a lot of people would call in and they couldn't find a birth certificate. Maybe they were born at home. So then I would get in the book and hunt up their baptism. And then I would type up an official letter, and we had this gold seal that we put on there, and that worked for them. Also, I was called, sometimes they would be groups that would come to look at our windows. And so then I would come over and, tell them about the windows. And one time I was called over to sit on a ladder and be ballast because they kind of had it hanging over the balcony behind me while they were doing something. And so I sat on the ladder until they got done with that. But there were all kinds of different kinds of jobs back in that day. So I started either the end of '69 or the first part of '70. And so I can remember, sometimes I would be called upstairs to kind of babysit the class when a teacher would be called out for some reason or another. I really remember that the kids all were very respectful. They didn't call me Mrs. Frankenbach, that is a mouthful, but they all called me Miss Sandy. And I do remember that a lot of people would come in the secretary's office and talk about their problems. And I was never sure whether I was supposed to take those problems across the hall to pastor, if I was supposed to keep them to myself, just exactly how to handle them. When we used to type address labels. When I did get through Drabus, Gottman, and Haney's, I was nearly done typing because they were the bulk of the congregation. And those address labels were the pits. It was really nice when we didn't have to mess with them and 4 copies and all that. When I think back, they were really fun times. We did a lot of laughing in that office down there. We were vacant. They sometimes would call me back. I told somebody that then when we get a minister and I couldn't boss everybody, then I would retire again. But I know I worked for Pastor Brucius, and he came, I think, in '90. But I don't remember how long I actually was with him before I retired for the final time.